Okay.
Well, Judy, thank you very much for taking part in this discussion with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you're doing this.
Yeah, thank you. I guess the first thing I want to know is, obviously the next mayor and council are going to have a number of issues to deal with. And I guess I'm just wondering, for you as a candidate and someone who's looking to be mayor for the next 4 years, where do you see infrastructure ranking in terms of the priorities that the next mayor and council need to deal with?
As you might have guessed from my whole campaign to date, it's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to separate out fixing the city and separate out from fixing City Hall. The two go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
In order to deal with the infrastructure deficit, we also have to change the way we do business. But overall, I have made my first priority are addressing our infrastructure deficit,
Mm-hmm.
and coming up with a long-term strategy for a humongous issue that's before us, has been neglected for many, many years.
Right. So why is it your number one priority?
Why? Because I think this city, which is great,
Mm-hmm.
can be so much greater if its foundations are secure.
Mm-hmm.
It is hard to talk about economic growth for Winnipeg when your roads are in such disarray, when people are experiencing obstacles to getting to work or family activities on time because of either potholes or water main breaks or traffic congestion.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, we could add traffic signals and our failure to have weatherproof lights in the city. I mean, the list goes on, and people are prevented from actually doing their day-to-day business and contributing to the economy because of the state of our infrastructure.
Right.
That's certainly number one. I think there's also a question of health and safety. We've allowed our infrastructure to deteriorate to the point where grave consequences are in store.
Mm-hmm.
We only have to look at Montreal and a collapsed bridge or other areas in terms of serious issues where people's lives have been in jeopardy.
Mm-hmm.
And safety is at risk. And so I think that's a critical issue for dealing with the infrastructure. The third is it's hard to talk about Winnipeg as the place to come to and the place to stay if in fact you're embarrassed by the state of your roads and your inability as a city to move people around on an efficient, safe way. So it's from the point of view of attracting people to Winnipeg or attracting tourism or making Winnipeg a center of innovation and creative arts. Hard to do that. Those are our strengths, but hard to do when your infrastructure is crumbling.
Right.
The other big issue is how do you convince our children to stay when they don't see a plan from their city hall to actually fix a humongous infrastructure deficit. And at the rate we are going, unless this is addressed as a number one priority in the next after the next election, we're actually doing the most irresponsible thing possible. We're handing a legacy of debt to our children. We're giving them the prospects of a crumbling city. And I think that's just absolutely irresponsible.
So it's a huge problem.
It's
where do you start to fix it? What's the first thing to do?
The very first move by City Council would be to start a planning process around the infrastructure deficit. So, by all accounts, we are looking just at the city of Winnipeg at a deficit that is now totaling about $8 billion.
Mm-hmm.
Now we know we can't deal with that overnight. It first and foremost begs a long-term plan. So we have to make infrastructure a key central program of the city of Winnipeg. Mm-hmm. Not an issue that we pull off the shelves whenever there's some horrible climactic development that forces us to repair something, or simply look at it as a tool to stimulate the economy in times of recession, but as a permanent feature of government, of local government in collaboration with the other two levels of government. So the first thing is we make it a priority. at City Hall, we begin the planning process, knowing that it will take, and we're not talking about a short-term plan. We've got to look beyond the election cycle.
Yeah.
We've got to look in terms of a 20 to 30-year plan with clear markers along the way, so people will know that there is a plan. And although we're going to have some they're going to go through some rough patches in terms of more frozen pipes or burst pipes or water main breaks or sewage backup, we're going to have to deal with this on a priority basis, street by street, block by block.
Is your sense that there isn't much of a plan in place now, and that's sort of what needs to be developed? Because I mean, my understanding is there is, to some degree, the city has prioritized, over the long-term capital budget, what it'll address.
Very recently, the city finally got around to attacking this problem on a more planned basis. For almost 10 years, as you know, we had pretty much a hands-off approach. The property taxes were frozen. We didn't have the revenue or the plans to deal with infrastructure. It was not done according to a specific timetable and a set of priorities. City Council, after being confronted with this deteriorating situation, has decided to move towards a more planned approach with a property tax increase that has revenue streams for infrastructure. I totally support that. It's very much like the proposal I proposed in the last election and what I said in this election, which is we all have to do our part. Property tax increase is part of the equation. We can no longer have we can no longer accept a frozen tax approach, because it's just going to mean an inability to put it sort of symbolically, with frozen pipes. So I appreciate the fact that City Hall has agreed that there should be a property tax increase that is in line with cost of living, including population growth. So the 2.95% is very close to my proposal. And I totally support the idea of 1% going into regional roads and 1% going into residential streets. And the other 9.95% going into ensuring we've got the operational capacity to provide the services that people expect and need, such as in times of snowfalls and water main breaks and frozen pipes. So that's important. But as you know, and we all know too well, that amount of money is a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
So we have to find a way to leverage that money. I've been looking at the options of, in fact, seeing if we could find a way for the city to actually up its number in terms of how much it puts into a borrowing program. But the recent Moody's report has put a bit of a damper on that, and I think we need some financial expertise brought into the city right after October 22nd to look at different options besides the property tax increase, besides the investment streams for infrastructure, and besides the ongoing work we have to do to convince both provincial and federal governments that this is a shared responsibility.
Do you have any inclination? I mean, your plan is to look at, to have an expert look at that. But I mean, do you personally look at any sort of tools that may be used to be able to increase that money, so more money is going into fixing infrastructure? I mean, are there some that you would say, okay, I will consider this, as opposed to things that you would say, no, that's totally off the table, and I'm not. Those aren't some things that I'll consider.
Yes, for sure. I mean, I last election, you will recall, I suggested that 1% of my tax increase should be used in terms of borrowing. Interest rates are low, and we can actually get a bigger bang for the buck, or take a bigger bite out of our infrastructure deficit by taking some of our money to do that. This time around, with the latest Moody's report, I'm reluctant to make that a central part of my campaign, but I am prepared to say that is an option depending on what financiers will tell us. So to bring together a blue ribbon panel of top-notch financial experts to figure out what are some ways we can actually do to leverage the limited revenue we have as a city to take a bigger bite out of our deficit. I was just going to look at excuse me if this is on tape, you
Yeah.
can always edit, right?
That's
But I did, so I've been reading the Mowat Center's report. And I want to look some more at some of the options that they've talked about, which is infrastructure bank, obviously the P3 model, green bonds, asset recycling, and community benefit agreements. So out there in the community, we've got some incredible expertise right across this country. Different organizations are taking on this challenge because this is not just a Winnipeg problem. This is a national problem. The last figures I heard was that we're up to about 123 billion in an infrastructure deficit across the country. When I was still a member of Parliament, we were appalled at the level then, up until about 2010, it was said it was about 60 billion. Well, it's growing astronomically because the longer we wait, the more we add to the price tag, and the bigger the situation, bigger the problem. So
some of those ideas. I mean, are there any in particular that you sort of look more interesting or more, that might be more worthwhile to you than others in terms of green bonds, P3s, infrastructure banks, those sorts of things?
yeah, first of all, with respect to P3s, that is a tool we need to always keep on the table. I have said that a project, a P3 project that actually is cost effective and value for money, I would support. I don't have an ideological position against P3s, but I do know that we've got provincial legislation that has to be followed, and I do know that we have to ensure that the risk management factor has to be looked at very carefully, and we have to ensure that we're getting value for money, given the ability of government to borrow at lower rates than the private sector always has to be considered. But if a P3 is advanced, where in fact we're transferring the risk to the private sector, and at the end of a 30-year period, for example, we have an asset that is in the condition it was when we started. That's obviously a boon for the city.
Do any particular projects in the city stand out as being ones that may be worthy candidates for P3s?
Well, we know, in fact, that the completion of the transit way is a P3. It's on the books as a P3, and I think I will certainly pursue. I won't interfere with that process. I think it's, in fact, the federal money is tied to the fact that it is a P3. I think we need careful evaluation every step of the way, and I really appreciate the Heavy Construction Association's emphasis on transparency in terms of decision-making process, and then transparency in terms of the review, ongoing reviews of any big projects that we undertake. In terms of the other ideas, we're looking at them all, and we're actually in the middle of developing our infrastructure investment proposal as we speak. It's something I've been working on for some time. I wish I'd had it ready yesterday when the press started asking me about how I was going to pay for the $20 million outstanding on the completion of the transitway. But I made the false assumption that, in fact, when the city council approved this, that they had a financial plan in place. And if it's not the case, then we have to add that to the list of problems and issues confronting the city.
But the infrastructure proposal, the full infrastructure proposal, is something that you're going to be releasing later in the campaign or in pieces over the course of the campaign?
Actually, we'll do it probably next week, and it will be in one fell swoop.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And relying heavily on some of the information from the Heavy Construction Association. That the 6 principles, I think, have to be included in any kind of infrastructure plan. They provide the basis for and the framework for tackling such a humongous problem. And one of them is that has to be adhered to. Besides, making it an ongoing program. Besides. Recognizing that as part of economic growth, besides a transparent decision-making process, besides public accountability through reviews, there also has to be a much different relationship between the city of Winnipeg and the research and development community. And there are so many possibilities for achieving infrastructure developments that have more durability and life and have a longer life cycle, and more sustainable and respect the principles of sustainability more than we're doing now. In fact, the city, as far as I can tell, has basically closed its door to, or has not been proactive in seeking out advice from academics and technicians in our city. We've got wonderful capacity at the University of Manitoba. Engineers who are working steadfastly on the questions of durability and life cycle infrastructure. And we need to open up the lines of communication and ensure that any steps forward by the City of Winnipeg are based on sound, science-based, research-based analysis and ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So.
One of the other aspects, I mean, of the the Manitoba Construction Association 6 principles, and of course the IFC report, and you referred to it a little bit earlier on in your comments, talking about the financial arrangement, the planning and the financial arrangement with senior levels of government. How would you go about trying to improve how that works, and the way that the City of Winnipeg would be able to have its priorities better planned, better funded, in partnership with those senior levels of government?
Well, given the size of our infrastructure deficit, we have to find a way to have a better relationship with the provincial and federal governments, especially the federal government, whose involvement in addressing the infrastructure deficit of this country has dropped off to appallingly low levels. There has to be a continued pressure through the City of Winnipeg, the Mayor and Council as one entity, but also as part of our joint work with the Federation of Urban Municipalities, FCM, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, as well as at the interprovincial level. Every province, every city is dealing with this problem. So we, in effect, although I hate to use the old words, the old language, but in effect, we're all looking for that new deal. With the federal government, where it's recognized that more and more of the responsibilities for maintaining civil society in this country is put on the shoulders of city governments without the revenue and without the taxation capacity.
So really, in a sense, it's about lobbying and about sort of collectively lobbying.
It's about, yeah.
And it's not just about something that you're going to do, like sort of on your own as mayor specifically.
Oh, no, I mean, but the mayor can play a role in terms the mayor has a job to do in terms of developing good relationships with other levels of government. The way the relationship between the City of Winnipeg and the province of Manitoba has deteriorated over the past number of years, and I'm not talking just about Sam Cates. I think we were also facing some difficult issues when Glenn Murray was the mayor. We've got to repair that relationship and start to work collegially and on a collaborative basis, not as if we're warring camps. Federally, so that's number one. At the federal level, besides joining and being part of the FCM's efforts and the Premier's council, we could be actually visible and present in that process. The Mayor of Winnipeg has been visibly absent from those discussions at FCM, and when big city mayors have gathered together as a body to try to influence and lobby the federal government, we've been missing in action. And I think a key role for the mayor, with the help of her council, is to in fact be front and center in all of those discussions and work to find that critical mass so that we can actually reshape the relationship between the two levels of government. But I guess what I would also say is none of this is easy. We're in difficult times all the way around. Every level of government is struggling right now in terms of competing demands. But I believe that I have an ability to break through some of that because of my years of experience working at both the provincial and federal levels. And I know from past experience that change is made when, in fact, we work more collaboratively and when we cross party lines. And I think about the influence when I was finance critic in Ottawa, we had in terms of reshaping the federal budget in 2005. I think about some of the work I did with Jim Flaherty when he was the finance minister, and as we all know, a loss to when he died to the work in this area. I think people, we can't be rigid in terms of ideology when it comes to something as fundamental as the infrastructure deficit. It crosses ideology, it crosses parties, and there has to be a different style of relation, a different relationship. It's got to be as partners, and we've got to make the city, we've got to make the province and the federal government understand that we aren't a poor cousin in this relationship. We are an equal player. The city is faced with enormous problems, and we are the center now of really building civil society. It's here where we're going to actually withstand the pressures of economic collapse, or environmental degradation or peak oil. It's here where we're going to build the capacity to confront some pretty big issues on the horizon.
Right. At the provincial level, it's been talked about, and it goes back to the IFC report, that some candidates in the race have mentioned trying to get a larger share of the PST increase, like that's proportional to the city, the size of the city, and the importance of the city just in terms of the provincial economy. What's your position on that? Is that something that you will be pushing for if you're elected mayor for a portion of the provincial PST?
My first priority is to get our own house in order. I think the city's done a terrible job of ensuring it's tapped into every possible way to raise revenue and to spend wisely. I think the fact that we've had a property tax freeze for all these years, and the absence of a long-term infrastructure plan tells me we don't have the right to demand something from another level of government when in fact that agreement does include particular benefits for the city. And we do know that part of that PST, that 1% increase in the PST, has gone into city infrastructure, and that there has been collaboration, and it doesn't proceed without the two parties sitting down at the table together to go further, to demand at this point a percent of the whole 1%, or any other revenue sharing program requires first the city mayor and council to get their act together, to have a program in place, that a plan that's costed and with specific targets and timetables. But it also requires, in order for us to go forward, it requires us to get our house in order in terms of how we do business. We cannot proceed go one step further in terms of demands on other levels of government till we've cleaned up the mess at City Hall, till we've actually dealt with some of the most egregious developments any city has faced in Canada. The issues around backroom deals, around cost overruns, the perception of a few commercial developers getting access over others to City Hall has to stop. And I have promised, as one of my first orders of business is to say we can get our house in order. We don't have to wait for the provincial government to say you could have an ethics commissioner. We can expand the office of the auditor right now under legislation. Add to it the powers of an ethics oversight person. Add to it an independent watchdog. Ensure that every councillor and every administrator, senior administrator, and every employee of City Hall falls under a code of conduct, code of ethics, and follows conflict of interest regulations. All of which is now very weak and very haphazard.
Right.
So there has to be a new footing and a new approach on that front.
Right. Winnipeg, I mean, just there's the city of Winnipeg, obviously, but it's also part of the broader capital region. How would you try to improve the planning process with some of the other regional partners around the city of Winnipeg in order to be able to better coordinate the development of better regional infrastructure?
Again, I think it comes back to first Winnipeg getting its house in order in terms of our own infrastructure problems and lifting the the transportation plan off the shelves and starting to actually put in place a concrete program to implement that transportation plan. So it's first getting our house in order. Then it's working with the province on the regional plan, and it's building relations with our neighboring municipal governments.
We talked about where some new money would go, but is there anything that you would do as mayor to specifically try to make the dollars that the city spends go further than they already do? You talked about where you would take new money and where you'd allocate it, but the existing budgets, I guess I'm sort of wondering, what would be your plan to maximize the money that is spent on infrastructure, that the city does spend, to make sure that we're sort of squeezing every penny out of it, so to speak?
One way is obviously through infrastructure developments that are well planned, well designed, and using the latest in research and development. Something we don't do now. They often say that a well-designed, even though it may be more costly at the outset, a well-designed plan with the most up-to-date materials and engineering. What's the word I'm looking for?
The engineering and the different.
It's really I think we start with making sure let's back up. So we have an infrastructure deficit that is humongous, $8 billion.
Yeah.
The first thing that has to happen is there has to be the 4-year plan in terms of our budgetary process and how we actually, because what we haven't. Let me back up. We're gonna enter City Hall with a plan that's in place by another mayor.
Yeah.
So the first thing is to make sure, in terms of preparing for the next budgetary year, that we have to obviously visit that plan and make sure that council is going forward on the same page. That's the first thing. So the 4-year cycle is critical in terms of how much we are going to be looking at in terms of property taxes and where those and the revenue streams that are part of that. So even though it's on the books now, I can't assume as a new mayor that that's a fait accompli. Our hands are not tied by the actions of a previous council. So we have a fresh start. I like the basis that I like where we're at, but I want to make sure that we've got all the information. I'm not sure what other skeletons there may be in the closet, what other financial issues we might face. So we've got to have it all on the table. A good example would be the transit plan. The fact that we had assumed that the $20 million was financed through a borrowing strategy, but obviously it seems nothing's happened. So first, getting a good look at the books, hiring a CAO that understands the importance of good planning and understands good governance, someone who's got experience with both the public sector and the private sector, because it's going to take partnerships. Working with the senior administrator and with that person, having the senior administrators start to work together as a team so that you ensure that infrastructure is your top priority and all departments feed into that, and the coordination is done on the basis of the latest technologies, the engineering innovations, the proper design, urban planning, and the workforce. And some of that may involve cross-training, some of it may involve reallocation, some of it may involve shifting of resources so we've got people in place where they're needed to deal with the possibility some real infrastructure problems happening this winter. Whether it's continuation of frozen pipes or water main breaks in the dead of winter or burst pipes. There's not to mention the possibility for a huge snowfall, and we need to be prepared to deal with that. So there's the immediate budgetary planning and the reorganization at City Hall. So we've got one team working together on overriding concern of this city, which is our infrastructure. Then, but at the same time, we've got to present to the public the 20 or 30-year plan that will see the elimination of that infrastructure deficit and ensure that we have, and that we're not just focused on repair of old infrastructure, but that we look at new infrastructure based on how those projects can enhance economic activity in the city. So it is in that context I would place the completion of one rung of transitway. I mean, I think a city of our size desperately needs a good transportation system. One is rapid transit, one is active transportation, the other is our master plan, our master transportation system for the city and the region, all of which is still in doubt or in some state of confusion. So working with Centerport, working with the regional municipalities around Winnipeg, ensuring that and working with neighborhoods and communities who are facing serious problems in terms of, like St. Boniface, with the huge trucks going down the middle of their communities. So
it's making sure everything kind of fits together.
Make sure it all fits together, and that there's an actual plan. I could talk forever on this. What else? What have I missed?
Well, I was going to say, we talked mostly about core infrastructure, but what about on the social infrastructure? I mean, core is kind of defined as the streets, roads, water pipes, that kind of stuff. Social is more recreation facilities, libraries.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So some of those sorts of things. Where do you see there being a balance in terms of investment, in terms of between those two areas? Because that's, obviously, I mean, that's one piece of the infrastructure deficit's core, but then the other is the social infrastructure with aging facilities and those kinds of things. Like, what is your plan to kind of deal with that side of the ledger?
That's an important part of the infrastructure deficit. We've got some real aging arenas that are without a plan in place. We've got the Sherbrooke pool that may need to be revisited in terms of, is it the best we can do in terms of a important recreation facility? Are we making the best use of our investment in that area? I think, sorry, your eyes went up on that one.
Oh no, I just wondered if you could elaborate on that.
Well, as you know, Sherbrooke pool was shut down. Mm-hmm. The city then said, we're gonna consult to see what the community wants, and people said, we don't need more consultation. And the mayor was finally forced to say, we're gonna act, and he found what was the organization that came up?
Kinsman.
The Kinsman.
Yeah.
And so now, that's approved in principle.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure. Here's a good microcosm of the problems we're facing as a city. Mm-hmm. Is this a well-planned project? Have we ensured that we're building a facility that will last 30 years and not just 10 years? Mm-hmm. Are we making sure that have we looked at logical partners in terms of this facility? Have we talked to the University of Winnipeg? Mm-hmm. Have we talked to Hydro to see if there's a better way is there a green energy proposal
mm-hmm.
that would make this more sustainable? So I see it as a microcosm, and maybe that's been done. My sense, it hasn't been done. Mm-hmm. And that's a good example of where you want to make sure you're doing the right thing.
But you would, I guess, and I mean that's just one facility.
Yeah,
but, I mean, would your inclination be to make sure that those can be reinvested in or kept open, or would you look at some other types of efficiencies on that in terms of how you deal with some of these sort of aging facilities?
Well, we know that we've got recreation centers and community centers that are struggling to keep the lights on and to keep their facility in good repair. The whole city program, recreation and community centers, is very low on the city's priority list. It needs to be an integral part of making a city that works. It needs to be part of the infrastructure plan, because without adequate places where families can go for recreation, or young people can go to have leisure activities as opposed to being out in the streets and being lured by gangs. We're just cutting off our nose to spite our face, so it has to be part of any plan. In the last election, I had a reasonable proposal for giving some supports to recreation centers and community centers, and to revamp how we fund them. I haven't pulled that one off the table and put it into this campaign yet, because my first priority has been the fact that over the last 4 years our infrastructure has deteriorated significantly, and we've got a pressing problem in terms of roads and potholes and back lanes and sidewalks and pipes and sewers and water mains and wastewater treatment centers, never mind even rapid transit. So the problems are enormous. So it's got to be part of the planning process. I don't have a number. I don't have a magic solution in terms of how we do it, but I do know it's got to be part of the equation. So just as much as we need to be able to fix the road so people can get to that recreation center, and there's proper water system so ice can be made and kids can enjoy the facility. We also need to make sure that the actual physical space is sustainable, is part of the infrastructure deficit program, and is part of our community building process.
Anything else that you want to add?
Oh gosh, there's so much we could talk about, isn't there? I mean, you look at whether it's infrastructure covers so much. I mean, we could. I mean, and the demands coming at us are extraordinary. So we've got several different levels. All of which require planning and citizen input. And so my biggest concern is that we actually open up City Hall so that people know the extent of the problem, and we invite as much. We draw in the expertise that is in Winnipeg to make to start to address this problem. We can't do it on our own. We need to do it in consultation with the citizens of Winnipeg. We need to draw on the expertise in the city. We need to have much better relations with the two levels of government, and we need a plan that has the buy-in of City Council and the administration. We're going to start working together as a team, as opposed to people trying, because the process and the planning, the process is so cumbersome or so unclear that people start to find and run the process, and so the squeaky wheel gets the attention. We've got to make sure that decisions are made on the basis of good planning, not on the basis of which interests have the ability to get through to City Council or the administration.
Great. Thank you very much
for
thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it.